We're making these decisions for some specific reasons. We make every decision really with the long-term health of Xbox in mind. And what happens when an industry doesn't grow?
Microsoft cutting almost 2,000 jobs at Activision Blizzard.
But in no way were we alone in that.
Just this week, the video game streaming site Twitch announced 500 job cuts, and software company Unity said it's cutting 1,800, a quarter of its workforce.
And this ambition kind of also drove us to kind of try things that maybe we shouldn't try.
And so I think that just shows you that we got inefficient.
The workers, the people who are actually doing the day-to-day work of developing the games, they are laid off.
I might get the email saying like, no, we no longer need you.
Today's your last day, goodbye.
Not a stable industry wherever you go, whether it's AAA or even in indie spaces.
Boy, do we have a show for you.
Hello, thanks for tuning in. My name is Perry Gottschalk. This is Played Off. It's a video interview series with those affected by the layoffs in the video game industry. Joining me today is Blake Hester, co-host of Something Rotten, formerly of Game Informer. Blake, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. I'm actually especially tired today. I don't know if you knew this. I was laid off recently. And so I usually sleep until noon, but I had to get up today at 7:45 in the morning. So you're catching me in quite a rough spot.
Does that mean that you were laid off? Does that mean you've transitioned? You found work? You're on the freelance grind right now?
No. I just had to wake up early because I had to go to the doctor. Fun. I had that moment. Do you ever do this when you have an early appointment? You wake up and it's like a come to Jesus moment. You're like, how can I get out of going to this appointment? And then I checked and they're like, you can't reschedule within 24 hours. And I was like, I'm not going to pay for whatever it would cost me if I called.
Like $300.
Yeah, so I had to get up and take the train into the big old apple over there. So if I fall asleep during this, that's my bad. I had to go to the oncologist. I don't know what to tell you.
Fair. We'll try and make this as entertaining as we can. Blake, you've written for, in addition to currently co-hosting Something Rotten, you've written for Polygon, Vice, Rolling Stone, Playboy, Waypoint, Unwinnable, tons of places. You were on the freelance grind for a long time, even before you kind of set foot in Game Informer. What led you to writing?
Well, it's a tale as old as time. A young man was bored one day. That's kind of the real story. I had always wanted to be a writer in some capacity in my life. I generally thought that would have been writing music. I grew up playing in metalcore and hardcore bands. I guess metalcore. The genre distinction is not important. But so I grew up playing in those, and I thought that would be the writing outlet. I failed to realize all of my bandmates were supremely talented and I wasn't. So when that didn't work out, I found myself really bored. And at the time, I was playing a lot of video games. This would have been the tail end of the PS3, PS4 coming out. I was like, well, let me try my hand at writing video game reviews or whatever. I was really into Rev 3 at the time. That Matt Scoville was part. It was like Discovery Channel's video game channel. It was kind of interesting. And all those people, Max Scoville worked there, who's been at IGN for a long time. Adam Sessler, who, that's unfortunate these days, he was there. It was a pretty interesting channel. And it inspired me to go for it myself. And then, I don't know, in 2015, Polygon started paying me. And I was like, I guess this is my career now. And lo and behold, it was. So that's it. That's how I got into it. I was just bored.
Gotcha. And so there was just that natural shift into writing about games.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so if I'm being more earnest with my answer, I've always been really into games. like, I mean, I grew up as a young boy in the 2000s. All my friends were into games, but I always felt like I was a little more into games. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like this is how I define it in my head, where I'm like, I knew I was more into games. They were into Call of Duty and I was into Kingdom Hearts. And they would make fun of me for liking Kingdom Hearts. As like, these days, anime, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, that's mainstream. But back in the day, at St. Bernard Catholic School in Louisville, Kentucky, you're getting made fun of for liking Kingdom Hearts. So that's how I know I was a little bit more of a gamer. And I've always been like really fascinated with how things are made. I've watched so many documentaries about the making of a movie or an album or whatever, and I've never engaged with the piece of art itself. Like, I just want to know how it was made. I just did this for the Robert Pattinson Batman the other day. I've never seen that movie, but I watched like an entire hour and a half making of, and I was like, that movie seems pretty cool, I guess. So I think there was just like that convergence there. Like, I was naturally into games. At the time, I was looking into like doing something different with my life. I was playing a lot of video games. Video games were really interesting to me at that time, especially like a new console coming out and everything. So, and once I like landed on, I don't just have to write reviews or whatever, which like I never enjoyed doing. I was like, I can interview people and tell stories. Like, that's way cooler. So I think it was just like the confluence of all those things that I was like, let me do it. Video game creators are crazy.
Yeah.
We talked to them for a while.
I think some of the best pieces I've read that have come out of you were things like, I was thinking it through in my head one time, and I said it was like part road trip story, part Springsteen kind of expose. Not that you're like writing the same way that Springsteen writes songs, but like it's got that feel of like hitting the open road, and you do make these pieces about discovery in the same way that I feel like someone like Springsteen brings to it. But
yeah, I appreciate you saying that. The dirty secret of all my like travel pieces or whatever is they're all just kind of carbon copies of Anthony Bourdain's books throughout the years, and I guess a little bit of Chuck Klosterman, because he had that really great road trip book that he wrote when he was at Spin, Dying to Live or whatever, Killing Yourself to Live, I think. Anyway, I was always like really attracted to like travel writing. I like love food shows. Like, I love, like, Food Network is just like the coolest collection of like, hey, we sent a guy to a weird place to eat food, and I was like obsessed with that as a kid. So like when I became a games writer, that's what I wanted to mimic, was like the dudes in other industries that were like, you know, whether they were traveling for food or music or whatever the case may be. Like, I was like, let's try that in games. And no one wanted to read those articles. I think the traffic was really bad, but it was fun to do. You had to go to a cold place.
Especially, and like, I haven't seen a whole lot of writing in that same niche, I guess, because you're right. It's all that's all Food Network is, and you get to games, and it's like, here's these exposés.
Yeah, there's certainly a little bit of it. Like, I think I don't know. I don't want to speak too out of pocket. Like, I felt like for a while I had the market cornered of like the guy who does video game travel writing. Which is like, not to say it doesn't exist elsewhere. Like, there's that book In Bed with Game Developers and all that stuff. But like, I always wanted it to be more of a thing where like other people were like going and telling these like geographically based video game stories where the games are like secondary to the person and the place where they are. And I think there's a variety of reasons why that's not a thing. And it mainly, the biggest one is like, it costs so much money to get on a plane to a different country, you know? And like, I was just fortunate / majorly privileged to like have a really good in with Polygon, which back in the day had an absurd freelance budget, and then Game Informer, who just like has the company model exists around needing travel. So I think that's the only way I could have ever done it. But I always wanted like more video game travel writers because it seemed so obvious. Like any other artistic medium, like it is so defined by the area it's created in. That's like, just send people out, like, please go, or like writers based in the countries, like whatever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted it to be more of a thing, and it just never took off, and now probably never will.
Well, I hope it does. It's important because, like, you think about these, I guess, video game auteurs, you know, the big names and directors like Suda51. Do you have a Suda51 if he's not attached to Japan? You know, can Suda51 exist in Alaska, you know?
yeah. Man, I had such a good Alaska story that was never accepted. There was some game that came out from an Alaskan studio a few years ago, and now I'm going to butcher the story, but basically I wanted to go to Alaska, and it would have been so cool, and would have won the video game Pulitzer for it. But it didn't work out.
Writing for Polygon, writing for Game Informer, whether it was, you know, travel was how they kind of operated within scope as a business, or they just had these larger budgets. You got to take these big swings, write these pieces that you were given the freedom to be able to write. What were some other things that really were just good about working for Game Informer?
For one, Game Informer is a magazine first, which means, save for like a very brief period of time, like with one specific publisher that was there and gone within like 6 months, we never had to give a shit about SEO. Like, unless something's changed in the last month, I assume it's the same. Like, my job, no one was ever sitting me down and be like, hey, what are we going to run this month to hit all this SEO bullshit garbage? And it's probably put me at a deficit now that I'm on the job market, that I don't really know much about SEO trends and how to do that shit. But like GI, because we had the magazine, and the magazine, like, frankly, made so much money, we never really had to worry about that stuff. And so, like, I think everyone just had the freedom to do whatever, and it didn't really matter. And like, not I shouldn't say, and it didn't matter. Everyone had the freedom to do whatever they thought would be cool, / as long as it's deliverable, right? Like, as long as it's something you can produce and it's within the budget and scope, blah, 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 blah. But it was never like, you know, hey, the X game is coming out, we need 35 guides on launch day or whatever. We didn't do guides, you know, like, God bless all the guides writers out there. I think my lucky stars every day I didn't have to do that. And that we were able to, like, stretch our legs and, like, do cool stuff. And I think, like, one of them, which is a little different because our parent company laid some people off and it screwed us, so we had to beg for a freelance budget instead. So, like, this is a different conversation, but, like, getting to lead the freelance department was really great. And, like, I really valued my time doing that, especially as someone who, like, had come up many years as a freelancer. And, you know, dealt with my fair share of great editors and shitheads. I was like, great, I can try to apply what I like and don't like to as an editor. And, you know, who knows, I probably failed every day. And I'm sure if people are listening to this and be like, well, you never replied to my pitch, it's like, well, you know, you can't win them all. But like that, I really valued that, and being able to, like, work with writers around the world. And, like, work with Game Informer, which is, like, so person focused, that, like, I thought we had a really great program. You know, like, we paid within 24 hours. We covered, like, we did that. This is crazy. I don't know how this worked, but we did it through PayPal, which at first I was like, no, we're not paying people with PayPal. But then they were like, no, don't worry about it. We're going to cover all conversion rates if they're out of the country, and all PayPal fees, and then all the other paperwork would be the same. And it just meant we could pay people within one day. And it was great. No one ever complained about it. So we were like, we're good. So I really value that. Like, GI was just like, go for it. Just do it. I think that's the same for everyone there. It's just like, they're just trusted to do what will be cool. And as long as they can get their work done on time, like, go do it, you know? Yeah, I miss it, but also now I'm a freelancer, where it's like, that's kind of the whole gig anyway. So
yeah,
I guess I have it again. But
yeah, if your pitch gets picked, is right, the caveat there. Yeah,
and I don't have health insurance anymore, which is also a big change.
Maybe I'm gonna break the kayfabe here. Were we talking about your doctor's appointment when we went live? We were, right? Because you apologized for being tired.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are you navigating that? Because you don't have the health insurance.
I don't know, man. That's me next week. I mean, it sucks. Like, for anyone listening that might not be too aware of me and my peculiar body, like, I've had cancer twice. And so, like, I'm good. I'm coming up on the 5-year remission mark, which is when they consider you're quote unquote cured. But, like, also I have my final test next week. And God willing, I hope I'm cured. Doesn't mean I have the funds to just be able to pay it out, you know? So navigate, I don't know, like right before you called, my oncologist office called me and they were like, hey, we noticed your insurance doesn't work anymore. And I was like, well, ain't that just a kick in the head? That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. And they're like, no, actually, that's a we problem. So I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, like, I'm going to have to, I'm sure, go on Medicaid or whatever the case may be, go on payment plans. I don't know. Like, if we had this call maybe at the end of next week, I would have, like, a clear roadmap. But right now, I'm, like, dreading going to the doctor next week. Because I have, like, 3 different appointments. Because it's, like, I have to go get all of the fucking scans and pictures and blah, blah, blah. And then I have to go do the thing where you just go sit in the office. And they're like, guess what? You still don't have cancer. It's going to be $600 for this one sentence. So I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
I've got my fingers crossed for you, man, as you're coming up on this. Yeah, that 5-year mark is huge. I want to cut into the reason that you don't have health insurance is you were writing some really great stuff for Game Informer. You were heading up this whole freelancing initiative, and suddenly you weren't.
What?
Did I cut out again?
No, I was a joke. Like, I didn't know.
Oh. Damn, dude, I'm sorry to break the news to you this way, but...
I wonder I can log into Slack every day for the past month.
What does that day look like? I guess, first of all, you know, what happened? What happened?
Oh, man, this was so funny. I was asleep because I was on vacation, and I woke up to my alarm going off, and I was like, nah, I'm not waking up. But I realized I had a voicemail from Texas, which is where Game Informer's parent company is located. I was like, oh, God, why would Texas be calling me, of all places? So I listened to the voicemail. It's someone, who cares who, from HR, being like, hey, Blake, we called, but we couldn't get a hold of you. Could you give us a call back? And I'm like, oh, my God, just tell me you're fucking laying me off. Like, don't give me I'm sorry to anyone who works in HR, but, like, get a better job. That sucks. You paid shit money to fucking lay people off. Like, don't do it. So, I don't know. I hopped on the call with them, and they were like, hey, Blake, we tried to call you, but we missed you. And I was like, I'm here now. Come on.
Yeah.
And I was just like, am I laid off? And they're like, yeah, you're laid off. And I was like, all right. And that was that. Basically, it's a flippant way of telling the story, I understand, but out of survival, I have to treat it flippantly, right? I don't want to dwell too negatively on it. But, like, it was one of those things where it's like, that sucks. What do? I live in New York City. I don't have any savings. My rent is $1,500 a month, which... New York is not the worst. Like, there are certainly worse rents, but there are certainly better rents. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, where my last rent in Kentucky was $200 a month.
Oh!
Well, it was $600 total for the apartment, but I had 2 roommates. But nevertheless, I don't have children. I don't have anyone depending on me. I have a dog right there. So, like, my heart goes out to people who are in worse situations, right? Like, I am just fortunate that, like, I'm not in those positions. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a roommate who has a better job than me. Like, he's relying on my 50%, but he wasn't relying. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
But it was one of those things where it's like, well, fuck. I am a cancer victim, and now my insurance is out in a month. When is my next appointment? Over a month from now. Well, fuck. Like, that's coming out of pocket. Going to every old editor you used to have and be like, oh, well, Vice doesn't exist anymore. All those people who worked at Vice, all those editors I had are gone, and they're at company owned outlets, which is great. I support it. Shouts out to 404 and Remap. They're not taking, well, Remap I guess does take freelance work. None of them are going to be able to pay my bills. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just they're not in a position with that kind of budget where it's like I went to Polygon, they are not doing those big prestige features anymore. They're not paying the same rates that they were. All of a sudden, this is where things get really tricky because, back in the day, 2018, 2019, like I could do a story for Polygon that would pay X amount and I'd be like good for a few months. And that was awesome. Like shouts out to the pay structures at Vox Media back in the day. They used to allow that, but in 2024, things had changed so much post-COVID. That's where things started getting scary. Being like, man, I used to make $2,000 from this outlet. Now the most I can get is $500, maybe in a few months. And then you start going to other outlets and learn that pay is way worse elsewhere. Like not to name names, but some of the biggest outlets on the planet. Like, what are you fucking doing? Like, you're embarrassing. That said, go to Game Informer. We paid better than every other games outlet because of me. So pitch them, Kyle Hilliard at GameInformer.com.
Game Informer, too, just kind of took that big swing of... They're still under the GameStop umbrella, but you can subscribe to them and get physical print magazines again, but also completely unattached from like a Pro Rewards membership, which is great. That's got to put even more autonomy back into the hands of the people working there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where things started getting really scary is like when I was first laid off, I was like, oh, well, I was a freelancer and from, however, 2015 to 2020, I'll just be a freelancer again. And it's like, well, the market's decimated. So now it's been like, well, what do I do? Do I really want to go write guide? Like, no, I don't. Like, do I want to go do the news grind for IGN? I don't. Like, frankly, I have not too much experience, but like, I can't work for $25 an article and do that grind. Like, so I had to start making decisions about like, what am I going to do instead? And one of them was the brutal one of like, do I even really give a shit to write about the game industry anymore? And am I okay with jumping that line? Which is like, I guess I should feel blessed and privileged. A lot of people are laid off and they're like all of a sudden dealt with this like catastrophic financial situation. I'm just dealt with the moral implication of writing press releases. Like it could be worse, but
right.
That's where shit it was very clear that if I couldn't exist in the industry I had spent the last decade in, because the media landscape is just dunzo. Any jobs that do exist, well, there weren't any. Polygon had like one job, I think, before I was laid off, and that was like the last good job I'd seen gone up at an outlet in like years. So I was like, well, I guess I just am done to some extent, like this thing I had done and loved and staked my entire personality around. It's like, I'm done. Wasn't my choice. But like when, a PR person hits me up and is like, hey, are you interested in writing press releases for us? We'll pay you $2,000 a month consistent. I'm like, well, yeah, I am. Because otherwise it's go make $250 for a feature, a long form feature. It's like it doesn't make dollars. It doesn't make sense, like. So that's where things like get really gnarly, where it's like, well, I'm forced out basically.
Mm-hmm. How long, $200 for a long form feature? How long does it take you to write that?
I mean, I don't know, because it's like, I'm not going to say I haven't written for that amount, but like, I don't know what the expectation was in 2024. So like, I'm just told long form. That could mean, to some outlets, that means 800 words. To some people, that means 20,000 words, 30 interviews. Like, I don't know, like, if people are wanting me to do the kind of work I'm like, I don't know, known for doing, or if not known, the work I have done, like I can't do that for $250, $350. Like that, I'm going to write press releases. Like you're out of your mind. I think it's like a bad rate. Like $250, like I have in my mind what good rates are, and they are what like I tried to pay at GI, and it's like we're not asking anyone to do anything that we would consider long form for $250, $350, because like people have to make livings. And like that's what I feel like I was confronted with is like, oh, this is not a landscape where anyone makes a living anymore, you know. In games, I've been like trying to work into like different outlets that are outside of games. Rates are a little different there, but it's like I don't understand how anyone is supposed to exist as a freelancer anymore, because it's like, I mean, and maybe rates have always been this bad and I just wrote for the one outlet with good rates. If that one outlet isn't paying those rates anymore, then no one else is. Like, how do we make a living? I don't know. I don't think I have an answer, because everyone else I talk to is either doing like a back-breaking amount of work to make ends meet, or looking for the exit, like going to do PR, which creates a problem, right? Like all of a sudden you don't have a game press and you lose institutional knowledge. And as all these outlets fold and all these people leave, like what is there to replace it with? You know, like you need a functioning press to pray for any kind of accountability. If outlets aren't going to exist and they're just going to lay off more and more people, and the best like freelancers can get is $350 to $500, you're just not going to have a press because people can't do this. Like, I don't know, I guess if someone lives with their parents, which like I did when I was 22, when I started, like that's great, please do it. But like, where does the institutional knowledge go?
Something I've seen echoed a lot. Do you remember the yellow paint discourse, that screenshot of Final Fantasy VII with the yellow climbable paint, and everyone was losing their minds about it? It might have been Nathan Grayson with Aftermath, or someone pointed out and went on kind of a tangent about it, about this is the same discourse we had, you know, when Horizon came out, whether it was Forbidden West or Zero Dawn, and it just keeps repeating itself. And that's primarily, whoever it was, if it was Nathan or it was someone else, said we're in an industry that kind of churns people out. You can't survive on those freelance rates, and so you lose that institutional knowledge. And so even the conversations being had are just on an eternal loop, because you can't move past them when you don't have that workforce. You lose, like you said, the institutional knowledge.
It's something I think about a lot, and I think the yellow paint is like a good example. On the one hand, like we need more institutional knowledge. On the other hand, I'm really glad there's like a lot of the crusty dudes that were in here 10 years ago are gone. Like, get the fuck away. But on the other hand, like sometimes when you lose crusty dudes, and this is not me advocating for keeping bad eggs in an industry, but I'm saying when you lose old heads, people who have like done this for a long time that, you know, are good and worthy, like worthwhile people like we had at GI that ultimately just like couldn't make dollars, couldn't make sense out of it. Like you lose a lot of knowledge. Like that was something that was really cool at GI, was having an idea and someone who has been at the magazine for 20 years being like, I have this, the recesses of my brain are coming unleashed to like drop some knowledge on you. And it's like, yeah, how do you report on an industry without a foundational backbone of institutional knowledge? Like, how do you have like the well of knowledge you need to create reporting if like all that's left is people who have done it 6 months to a year? You know, like, and even then, who is teaching people to be a reporter? You know, like who is shepherding people? Like who is guiding people? Who is giving mentorship? No one. And then like, well, then no one just becomes a reporter. Then no one remembers the discourse we had 7 years ago. No one remembers that, Ken Levine's doing his whole big press cycle right now. And it's like, didn't that dude lay off his whole studio 10 years ago?
Why is no one talking about that?
Exactly, yeah. It's like, didn't he was like, I'm going to go play with Lego, so everyone just loses the job, but no one cares because Jeff Keighley got to play Judas early or whatever. Also, why is the game called Judas? It's all weird.
Yeah.
It's all weird. There's no solution, really. The solution is don't lay people off or don't close outlets, but we're beyond that point.
Mm-hmm. Something I think about as well, I'm glad you bring it up, is like, who's mentoring people, who's giving the experiences. Like, it sounds like through your experience at Game Informer, you tried to not pull up the ladder from behind you. You left it down, and you even reached out a hand to help other people climb it. That's awesome. But like, there are less and less internship programs. I mean, even Game Informer used to have an internship program that you were a part of, right? And
unpaid.
Yeah, unpaid, but it was still an internship that offered experiences like that, and those seem impossible to find. It wouldn't be asinine, and this isn't like a prediction or a wish, that there does come a point where, okay, a group like Gamers with a U in it that is buying up, The Escapist and all these places, hits their endpoint. You hit like an Embracer Group portfolio of media outlets that just cannot function, and then you lose so much.
Mean, I feel like we've seen similar things to that like 20 years ago. I mean, Ziff Davis back in the day had just like an obscene number of game sites. And it's like, why do you have all these sites that effectively like have their own audience, but also want the same audience, right? Like 1UP was owned by Ziff Davis. IGN is still owned by Ziff Davis, Team Xbox, EGM, all this stuff. UGO had a bunch of them. I mean, CBS Interactive still has, like, they had GameSpot and Giant Bomb, and I think, like, it's weird. We've seen these kind of, like, monopolies exist before, and it's been interesting to see that kind of come back with like whoever owns Destructoid. I guess that's Gamers, right? I think the issue, it's not a game press specific issue, is that like these companies that have always owned these .coms have always been like tech companies, and like there are some differences. Like I think like The Ringer, for example, is founded by Bill Simmons, who's like a sports. He had experience in the newsroom. Say what you will about Bill Simmons. That aside, like he has newsroom experience, right? I want to say the founder of Vox, Jim Bankoff, like I think he had newsroom experience. But like none of the fucking jerk-offs GameStop sent to be Game Informer's publisher, which is like our boss's boss. You know what I'm saying? None of them had newsroom experience. They were like people coming from fucking Amazon and Chewy and all these idiots. And it's like, well, great. Like they're not going to understand the business. And then that's what you see like from all these companies is like some dude just wanting infinite growth because they're used to working at in some completely different field at some startup that got VC money, blew off to the moon, whatever. And when press doesn't work that way, it's an entirely different industry. When press doesn't work that way, but you've expected it to work that way, you've created a head count in hopes that it'll work that way. And it doesn't, you just lay people off because that's the way tech goes. Like you build it up, you tear it down. You build it up, you tear it down until you get your golden parachute. Like we saw so many assholes at GameStop get when they did the fucking stocks bullshit. That's how it works. And then the problem is like, who cares if a startup goes away? There's going to be 20 tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like, I live in New York where we got startups for everything. You cannot believe some of these open air offices I pass over here for like, oh, we'll deliver your laundry to you or some shit. It's like ridiculous. But like when you do that to media outlets, like you're gutting institutional knowledge, you're gutting corporate accountability, you are gutting just the need to read pithy good reviews about fucking Persona, like whatever. Like it means so much more when you want to treat a media outlet like a tech company, which fundamentally they are just not. like it means so much more than when it's gutted than the startup that delivers laundry that's, you know, based in Williamsburg or whatever.
Right.
Media isn't just it provides a service, like a needed service. And like, this is video games. What, like, you know, but like we're also seeing real newspapers be gutted. Like it's not like a game press specific problem. It's a press specific problem. You know, God willing, I hope Game Informer lasts another 60 years. But it's like, I also hope institutions that report on the White House exist forever and aren't torn apart by like VC idiots because number didn't go up anymore. But like, you're seeing real problems. Like Vice it's not gone, but it might as well be. And I think it's at risk of us losing like one of the best archives of the last 20 years of like culture reporting. And it's like, well, because number didn't go up anymore.
Yeah.
So newsroom's done.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, great.
Those stories are vastly important. Even just as a historical record, I remember a decade and a half ago when I was going up through school, like Vice was all anyone wanted to talk about. Just that's how people got their news. That you start talking about losing these institutions, these outlets, and the institutional knowledge that helps back them up. You're talking about destroying historical records in a sense.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily it seems like Vice's archive is going to stay at 4 now, but I also like think we should emphasize 4 now. You know, like I don't think Vice's archive is around in 10 years, frankly, and I just hope everyone saved their work. And then it's gone. It's gone because like some VC idiot didn't know what to do with it. That stuff scares me because also like coming back to where I am, I looked at the industry and I was like, I guess I'm gone. And it's like, I didn't want to be gone. In a better industry, I would have been laid off, and then any other number of outlets would have been like, here's freelance work or here's jobs, you know. But instead it was like, well, there's nothing, so I'm gonna go write press releases. Which, to be fair, like, let me say up front, like, very fortunate that I have that opportunity. I do actually like it. I think it's pretty fun. It's a weird challenge I've never had to deal with before. We also do PR for like bands and shit. And it's like, how do you even write press releases about songs? Like, it's a really fun, creative challenge. But it's like, I would also like to go be a journalist. You know? Like, so I don't know. Financially, I feel lucky and fortunate right now. But like, I do feel like there came a day where I was like, well, I guess I'm done in the games media, and it wasn't my choice. There was just nothing to go back to.
I want to talk about what we were just talking about with context to your specific situation with Game Informer, GameStop. Someone at the top is seeing line not go up. Is that, you would say, the reason that you were let go from Game Informer, GameStop, or did it point to something else?
I think so. Like, as far as I've been told, it had nothing to do with me as an employee or my performance. I don't particularly think GameStop had fond thoughts of me, but my comrades at Game Informer told me GameStop basically just saw a number on a spreadsheet and said, let's get rid of this number. Now, where that comes from, I don't know. I mean, as far as I've always been led to believe, GI is profitable, but just because one part of a company is profitable doesn't mean it's immune from layoffs, right? Like, especially if other parts of a company are impacted hard enough, like, sometimes you just have to do sweeping layoffs.
Yeah, GameStop didn't sell enough Funko Pops this month, so sorry, Blake,
Yeah, who knows? I can only speculate. I guess is they did something stupid somewhere that everyone was like, bad idea. And then it failed. And they're like, oh, why? We didn't expect this to fail. Guess we got to lay someone off. I mean, I was the only one laid off in this round from GI. I'm sure there were other layoffs elsewhere in the company. It would be crazy if I was the only layoff. I'd be like, really? All you needed was $57,000 extra a year? That's it? So I assume there were broader layoffs, but I was the only layoff at GI. which I feel good about. Like, you know, I'd rather it be me than like, you know, like, God, we have so many like people who are parents there who like pay for school and all this stuff. Like, it would be a nightmare if they were laid off.
But even you know, Game Informer is what, a team of 20 max, right? I mean, so, that's even counting in the people who do the marketing and the advertising and the more less editorial positions there. But that's still, you know, one person in a team that small is impactful.
I mean, like, and the thing that worried me, I don't want to blow too much smoke up my own ass, but like I myself and Brian Shea, like, we ran the freelance stuff. Like, Brian was on the assigning and editing reviews, but like I was handling all the money and paperwork and getting people paid along with our office manager, Sarah. Like, I was liaisoning with her. I was fielding all our freelance pitches. I was editing all the freelance features, like, and then just the one day that was gone from GI, right? And it's like, what all now Kyle, who, God love him, it was not his job until one day he woke up and I was gone. Like, now he's taking that on top of his already full job. What people who cause layoffs miss is that the labor is just allocated incorrectly after that. Nothing gets better. People just become worse off because like, Kyle had a job that was not my job. Now Kyle has a job that is partly my job. And it's like, did he have room to take on that? I was like, I don't know. So when you cut someone like that, where we don't have a big enough team to have multiple people doing what I was doing, unfortunately, someone just has to accept it. And like, it sucks.
Depending on you know, what decisions get made, you have one of two outcomes. One is, you know, Kyle is doing infinitely more work and getting burnt out, or you have you just cut that. You know, Game Informer doesn't do these freelance features anymore. It goes either way. Either way is a shame.
And I think that's not an option, because the only reason we got freelance money is because of a layoff in the past. They had laid off several people. And we're like, we literally don't have enough people to write the magazine we put out. So that we were like, all right, you all have to give us a freelance budget. So it's like, I don't think you could cut the freelance, because like GI relies on it now, like, so strongly. Like, it was a lifeline for us, like getting all the reviews we needed, filling pages so that like the editors did not have to break their backs every week to fill that stuff. Like, I think the only choice is basically, hey, who's still on staff wants to take on this like not insignificant amount of work on top of your already full-time job. So it goes. No one thinks about that. I assume no one at GameStop had any clue what I did or what my job was, you know, and that's how they get to sleep at night, is they don't know who they laid off. They don't know how it impacts anyone, because they're not curious enough to be like, oh, what does laying this person off mean for the broader company? Well, it's like, you know, in that case, they can't lay anyone off because everyone is crucial to the company. And it's like, maybe you should just lay yourself off.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not my fault this company isn't doing well. I did my job. Maybe you should be laid off.
Instead, you get a golden parachute.
Yeah. So it is what it is.
What you're talking about, I mean, I was excited to talk with you. Again, I think I brought up earlier, because you are kind of an outside perspective to the people I've been talking with thus far, where I've chatted with, you know, someone who does QA, level design, narrative design, PR for the games that are being shipped by a company. You're within the games industry, but certainly not involved in the same way that the people I've already talked to are.
Right. Games press. I cover the industry.
Exactly. It is eerie I wouldn't say eerie in a good excuse me, I wouldn't say eerie in a good way to hear what you're saying and say, that sounds exactly like what, you know, Shantae or James or Andrew or any of these people we're talking about. And that's when it starts to feel a lot more, it's come up before this word, but like endemic. Somewhere someone is seeing that we're not making enough money. We are used to operating within a tech background, and so we can just shutter this, we don't have any realization of what, Microsoft, 1,900 jobs gone, that is 1,900 people's work that just gets redistributed, and there's all this fallout. I don't think we've seen it. Something another person brought up throughout the series was, he's afraid isn't the right word, but he's looking ahead at like the next decade of games that are going to come out and saying that it's going to suck. It's just interesting to reflect on how, hey, games industry making the games versus covering the games, shit still looks the same.
Yeah, I think like I know people like to ask like, oh, is this the worst time ever in the game industry ever? And it's like, not yet, because
not yet.
It crashed once.
Mm-hmm.
There was a crash in the 80s. Until we crash, it's not as bad as that.
Mm-hmm.
Because games almost went away at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like, and I think this is, look, something I hate is when people go do, biz dev like try to analyze biz dev and whatever, and they have like no background in it. So I am a lowly man who barely makes any money and has never led a $1 trillion tech company. But from my perspective, what I have to guess is happening is, one, the constant need for infinite growth, right? Line go up, good. Maybe some layoffs, even though line go up, so line go up more, which is very confusing. But line ever dip, lay everyone off. Like, that's just how it is. I also think like we are still seeing a fallout from lockdown that like we're not necessarily talking about. And it's like, I just remember companies seeming to like really staff up quickly as like all these huge sales came in when people couldn't leave their house. And it's like, it doesn't take a business major to understand people are spending money because they can't leave. You probably shouldn't staff up because that's going to end. And then I think like we've been seeing the fallout of that over the past several years of just these companies ballooning up because like they're making so much money in 2020, and then like that money goes away. What do you do with those people? Blah, blah, blah. You got to cut them so Bobby Kotick can have his new yacht or whatever. And I mean, that doesn't explain how like some companies can have record profits and still layoffs, which like still blows my mind. I don't really understand how that works. I also think like video games have become wholly unsustainable. Like a video game shouldn't cost $400 million. Like that's irresponsible. I mean, if you run the tape on that and you consider what AAA games cost 20 years ago, 20 years from now, are we spending over $1 billion like to make a video game? Like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Well, like, so even if you try and compare it to another medium or something, and you look at like even the blockbuster movies that are coming out in the summertime, yeah, they've been ballooned. Certainly, the MCU is ballooning probably the average cost of a summer blockbuster like infinitely, right? But you don't see the same just huge staggering increase in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. And so I think like I don't know if there's one specific thing causing this influx of layoffs, because these are different companies in different countries with different people working at them, but like from my perspective, those seem to be some of the causes. It is like the desire for infinite wealth, You know, Like a Dragon Infinite
Yeah,
Wealth.
not the Like a Dragon game in this case, but
yeah, Lockdown Fallout, I think. The other one I said that I can't remember. Laying people off despite record profits. That one doesn't even make sense to me.
Record profits and just unsustainability of the AAA game space. And it's staggering. You know, there was another episode earlier where we talked specifically about the Insomniac leaks that happened. And unfortunate as they were to dox people, there was still an interesting look at Insomniac's timeline, where they kind of addressed the unsustainability themselves as one of the people or studios making these. You know, how much was Spider-Man 2 to release? It was like $200-400 million in that range. And they're like, we can't do this again. And this was before the layoffs happened. Things already seem unsustainable to the people within the industry and the people making the money decisions. How much more unsustainable does it become as things just look bleaker and bleaker?
Yeah, and we still have a Grand Theft Auto coming out next year.
Yeah.
Eventually we're going to learn how much that costs to make, and it's going to be irresponsible.
Oh. Do you want to lock in a bet? You want to say like 500 million?
I think it's going to be 500 million.
Yeah.
I think Red Dead Redemption 2 was around 400 million. So it's got to be at least more than that.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you think can be done by employees within the games industry right now to kind of protect themselves? Are they just
unionize?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, switch industries. Unionize, I guess. Game Informer was too small to unionize, so we never did. We were told that by a union rep one time.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, you're too small for me to represent you all. We're like, why are we on this call?
That's crazy because, you know, so many definitions of unionization I heard were just like, all you need is two people, you know, in a working situation.
I mean, I think like we just needed help. And so like we reached out to one of the guilds or whatever, and like she hopped on the call and she talked to us forever, and we were like, all right, this is great, showing great interest. And she was like, so y'all are too small for me to work with. And we're like, what a waste of time.
Yeah. you could have opened with that.
Yeah, you could have said that in an email.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know, unionize, find a better industry. I frankly, in the games press, like I can't speak to development, like that's not where I work, but like in the games press, like maybe this sounds awful. I don't know why you would ever want to get in it at this point. Like when I got in it, it was still exciting. It felt like there was still cool work going on. In retrospect, a lot of it's kind of bad, but it was interesting at the time, right? Like now it's, I don't know, like I rarely go to any game site today. Like why would I ever go to the landing page of a game site? Just to be like, oh yeah, well, they all posted the same guides for the same game, you know? Like nothing feels new and interesting anymore, and like that's coupled with the volatility of the industry, which is directly contributable to not bad, but like bland content, right? Like if the only method of survival is SEO chasing, guides writing, quick hit bullshit, like, yeah, you're not gonna invest a lot of money in interesting, experimental, long form work, you know? And so it's like, I don't know why you would want to get in this field at this point, because it's just like, seems like you're going to do a lame job. Like I would be hard pressed to join a different site right now. Like, you know,
for added context to some of those numbers you're talking about, or just how bleak or pointless it seems. I last night was looking at one of these sites that you just described about landing page for the site, all you see are the lists and the guides and the SEO drivel. And I looked at their careers page. They had an open position for list writers. Cool, let's check it out. And it worked out to $19 per list. Each list is going to be 1,000 words. So that's just a shit rate to start with. But they're expecting 25 minimum of these per month. To even get past the application, you have to write them a sample list. And I stared at all the lists and I was like, okay, if I were to write one of these, what would I want to write about? It's either already been done because this content's being pumped out at unbelievable rates, because you can't survive on one article at $19, or it is just the most soul-numbing and, least creatively rewarding thing I could think of spending my time doing. And that's not a dig at the people who are writing it. You said earlier, respect to the people who are just out here trying to grind, but
I think to answer your question, if you're not in the games press, the way to survive is get a job somewhere else. It's a lot easier to make a lot more money and have security than working as a game journalist. Like, just go do anything else. If you're in the game press, I guess unionize or fine. Like, someone once told me, always have one foot out the door talking about a job. If you're in the game, I don't think anyone in the game press right now would be shocked to hear something like that, because I'm sure all of them are thinking the same thing. Like, protect yourself, organize, and if that doesn't work out, like, have one foot out the door. Like, take care of yourself. I wish this was a better field. It felt really cool and interesting 10 years ago when I joined, and despite all the younger writers who have come up in that time, I feel bad that there just aren't opportunities for them. Like, they aren't a part of an industry that feels exciting anymore. And a lot of those writers I was so excited about a couple of years ago have already jumped ship to PR. And it's like, well, you gotta do what you gotta do. No hope as far as I see it on the horizon. I'm not one to pretend.
It's a fun outlook. I see these sentiments that are like, oh, well, whether it's in the games industry or the games press, within the games industry, it's, oh, well, all these people can open up their own indie studios. Well, with what funding? Yeah. All these people who were laid off from Kotaku this time can do what the people at Aftermath did and make Aftermath 2. People are going to subscribe to 2 Aftermaths now, an infinite number of Aftermaths.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I want nothing but the world for all these reader-supported outlets. Like, obviously I do something fine, which is listener-supported, but, like, I have yet to... Defector works, right? And that's great. Defector's not a games outlet. Like, Aftermath is working. That's awesome. I don't think that's the answer, though. Like, Defector and 404 and Aftermath and Remap, like, they're all working because they're filling niches. Remap is a podcast. Aftermath is the games blog. 404 is the tech reporting. Defector is Deadspin. So it's like, yeah, to your point, are people going to pay for 100 Aftermaths, or are they paying for Aftermath because it's filling that specific niche they need? But, like, and, a board game one just came up recently, and that's great. Board game, yes, that is a specific niche. But, like, can you really have 50 reader-supported board game sites? I'd love to be wrong, and it'd be like, yes, they're all profitable, they're all doing great, everyone who works there is a millionaire. I just don't think that's true, and rather we're seeing these reader-supported websites work out because they are filling a very specific niche, and also the writers have established backgrounds and a lot of followers on Twitter, which, no shade, that is great, that helps a ton. You gotta, like, have your brand. But, like, I'm really worried that there's going to be this, like, rush to do sites like that, and it's going to not work out. Which, like, I don't know. I hope that's not how it happens, but like I'm a little weary seeing more and more people like going for it. It's like I don't know if we're taking. Does this make sense? Like
no, it does. It's when do you hit that litmus? You know, if we're to look at games press or what the state of games press was even a decade ago, and let's compare that to cable. And here comes Remap, and they are Netflix, and they're the first to do it, or whoever was the first to do it, and that's novel. Everyone goes to Remap, and then Disney Plus comes out, Hulu, HBO Max, all these 100 other streaming sites, and suddenly people are like, we're just back at cable again, you know?
Yeah.
And you're no longer looking at just subscribing to only Netflix. You're like, I have to subscribe to Remap, Aftermath, 404, etc. All these places, and suddenly you are spending more on your streaming than you ever did for cable, type of thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And to be fair, like we're not to that point yet.
Right.
But it just seems like that thing when you play out the tape is like, don't let the reader supported thing become that. Ideally, these sites, the established ones, will just get bigger and then they can hire more people, and that's how people create that reader supported industry.
Mm-hmm.
But like I'm definitely weary of it just being like, this time next year there are 40 reader supported game sites and one of them is doing well. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I don't know. I wish I felt like that was the solution in the way it seems like a lot of people do. And I just like, I don't think it is yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want it to be. And again, like to tie it back to the games industry, again, people are saying if if within the games press, people leave Kotaku and they make Aftermath, that is the equivalent of leaving a big studio to make your own independent one. And that's doable within the games press. Within the games industry, it's the equivalent of this example is outdated, but it's the only one coming to mind. It's like Tim Schafer leaving LucasArts to make Double Fine.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And he was able to do that. Awesome. You can't do that in today's space right now because where's the funding coming from?
Yeah.
Blake, I want to thank you for your time here today, and thank you so much for the insight. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to ask, I'm asking everyone on the show, is there something you want to plug? And since we're talking about the experience of having been laid off, that can extend to pointing someone towards something you did that you're proud of, that you're like, maybe this will get me a job, or a Venmo even, or even if you just want to point to like, hey, I watched this movie last week, it was cool.
Well, look, after I spent all that time disparaging the good reader-supported sites, please go check out my listener-supported podcast, Something Rotten. Nebula.tv/Something Rotten.
Real quick, what is Something Rotten for people who might not know?
It is a podcast loosely about grim, gritty, violent, and nihilistic games that I co-host with Jacob Geller, YouTube extraordinaire. In the past, we've covered such illustrious games as the Kane and Lynch series, Max Payne 3, Killer 7, Call of Duty, Last of Us Part 2, most recently Disco Elysium, which has been doing very well. It's all for free. You can listen to it on any podcast app. You can also pay for it for early, ad-free, and bonus podcasts. That's what it is. But I'm told we have good ads. People like our Adam and Eve ads. So, if you want discounts for sex toys, we also have those. We got it all over there. Something wrong.
As someone who listens through Nebula and gets the those bonus episodes are worth it alone. Especially that Nebula is only like what, $5 a month or something like that. So. Yeah, I think well worth it.
Let me look. Look. Here, this will be a real good plug. I'll just pull it up. I got to use an incognito tab since I'm logged in. Nebula.tv. Oh, I looked it up. If you sign up through nebula.tv/something rotten, it's only $2.50 a month right now. That's a good deal.
Yeah. I'm going to put that link in the description of wherever this comes out. Anything else you're looking to plug?
No, I don't know. If you like books, maybe follow me on Twitter at Metallica is rad, but I can't say anymore.
Okay. I do want to take the opportunity to plug, I don't want the series to make a dime. I would feel really shitty making money off of people who are coming on and saying that they've been laid off from their job. So don't support me, support Something Rotten, support any of the other things that the show has been on. But if you are a person who has been affected by these layoffs, there is a games industry job hunt Slack channel that I've seen floating around on Twitter, that the link will be in this as well. It's a community focused on providing job hunting resources to those impacted by a layoff or reduction in workforce within the games industry. I'm not directly affiliated with them, but they seem like a proper thing to plug, as well as Amir, Satvat.com. Amir has been working in the games industry a while, and on his website has put a bunch of resources, everything from job resources to career coaching that might be helpful if you're on the hunt for a job within the industry. That about does it here, Blake. Any other thoughts?
Don't lay me off.
Don't lay this man off. Thank you so much for being on again, and I have been Perry Gottschalk. This has been Blake Hester, and thanks for watching Played Off.